Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CyberE71 Thursdays. We are delighted to have you all here today as we continue to bring insightful discussions on AI, cybersecurity, and innovation in general. Today, we have the pleasure of having Kate, Customer Success Lead at AI71, who will be sharing her expertise on leveraging early product market fit validation as a key driver for startup success. And as always, the keynote will be around an hour. And throughout the session, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. After the keynote finish, we will have a Q&A session. And without further ado, Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Abdulaziz, and good evening, everyone. I was sort of debating between evening and afternoon. I assume everyone is in the same time zone, so it should be an evening for everyone. My pleasure to be here and share a bit of my experience in the domain. Let me jump into sharing my screen, and Abdulaziz, just let me know when it comes up.
Yep, so that.
Perfect. So the title is a little bit of a mouthful, and I apologize for that. But the idea for this session today is to share a little bit of our experience, my personal experience, and our experiences as an organization in, building the AI startup and what actually contributed to our success, being closer to the customers. But before I jump into that, I wanted to introduce myself. So my name is Kate, as Abdulaziz mentioned. I drive customer engagement at AI71. I've worked in tech my whole life, 8 of them here in the UAE, ranging actually, I came from security domain into AI, so we're sort of merging, I think, a lot of the backgrounds here. And over the past year, I have been engaged. I've been working with AI71 mainly on driving, AI strategy and the use cases development with some of our core customers. So what I wanted to cover with you today is going a little bit over the business landscape for Gen AI, just to set the scene and narrow a little bit the focus, because it's such a overused term these days, AI in general. I just wanted to add a little bit more precision to the conversation, to highlight what it can do and what more even importantly sometimes cannot do for you. So the limitations of the technology out there, because it helps, focusing the effort of businesses in this domain. Then actually switching to the product market fit validation and aligning the approaches and between the traditional tech industry and the specificity of AI. Bringing to you my observations versus the overall trends out there in the client landscape, and what do we see in this domain, especially over the past year. And I think what's going to be the most interesting part, and I'll try to not spend too much time before this, but jumping into the industry example on one of our products and how did this journey and how did the product market fit validation actually work for us, what worked, what didn't, and what did we learn. So as Abdulaziz mentioned, just throughout the conversation, feel free to drop off your questions, so you don't forget, because we'll be covering a few things, so you don't lose sight of the question if I leave something unanswered. So starting off with the business landscape, I think if you open LinkedIn right now, AI is most likely the most frequently used term, with the purpose, without the purpose. It's like, this honorary badge that everyone wants to put on their post, regardless of its actual content. And it feels that this whole wave is super new and everything is developing, in the last few years. But realistically, the field has been around there for quite some time. We're talking about 60 to 70 years. There's multiple streams of this discipline that live their own life cycles, be it machine learning, deep learning, or there's plenty more. And not all of them sort of ride the same way of the hype as the generative AI does. But my expertise and the company I work for is focused on the generative AI specifically, and that's the focus of today's conversation. I just like to make this distinction between, and highlighting this domain specifically, because people tend to get lost these days in just the general, excitement of the field. So generative AI, as such, is a relatively new field, right? It's just been around for about 4 years, and that's what brought, the spotlight to the field overall and the acceleration. So in very short words, the idea, of course, today, and I assume we have a very tech-savvy audience, so I'm not going to spend too much time in setting the foundation, but generative AI refers to a type of AI that can understand and create new content, original content, in different formats. Main idea here also is that the foundational engine behind all of the activities in generative AI are large language models. There's plenty of solutions out there, both closed source and open source. We're talking about, the bits out there like GPT, Claude by Anthropic, or more on the open source side, such as Llama, Falcon, the UAE proud development in the domain, or Jace. There's plenty of models out there. In general, whatever I will be mentioning to you today is a bit more applicable to the application layer of the game rather than the models. The models is a very special game of its own, and it's hugely demanding from the investment standpoint exercise. So it lives its own life, but it obviously defines what can be done in the industry. And right now, the model development drives a lot of innovation in the domain overall, and it drives it at the speed that I don't think has been seen in any industry to date. And just to illustrate the quick point here is, I put together a quick stats on how long did it take different, household names to reach their first million users. And, across different domains, it took from years, months, in best case for, more popular products. For ChatGPT, it took 5 days. This is something that I don't think the industry has seen before. Obviously, the overall digital wave of, people getting access to more devices and so on accelerated a lot of this. But the speed is what defines a lot of what is happening in the industry, and your ability to keep up with it and pivot also, because it's not about just getting the users that the GPT succeeded in, but also the level of speed of innovation that we're able to sustain then later on, releasing new models with advanced capabilities and so on, and your ability to keep up with it and to be able also to accommodate the these changes is going to define your success in this business. So on the overall, when we switch a little bit from the landscape of the business and or landscape of generative AI as a whole, and switch a little bit to what it actually does in the enterprise or government context. So what your customers can actually use it for. It generally boils down to 4 main things, which is content synthesis. This is what LLMs and solutions built on top of LLMs are very good at, summarization of the content based on the large knowledge base into concise responses. You can play around with the content quite a bit. That's the strengths of the models. You can build the assistant agents and or copilots. The line here is quite blurry, but the idea is that you can have real-time conversations. And what started off as just a conversational part, with now the models coming out more and more powerful. You can build in the task automation, and actually even drive individual actions. And these days, you can take it one step even further to be able to get agents to talk to agents. So actually remove the human from some of the flows altogether when you have AI agent on both sides of the equation, handling out some simpler or easier to automate tasks. And there's also a content creation, as in producing new content on top of the existing knowledge base, which is also, very interesting and threatening partially to some professions type of use case. But fundamentally, one way or another, you'll see your customers and the use case they're trying to tackle fitting into one of these domains. So it's not really a magic tool that can do everything and anything that a human can. These are the strongest side of the capability of the technology, and the use cases with the customers should fit within one of these domains. But there's also a lot of things that the large language models are not good at, or have some limitations that are important to understand, because it will affect how you build the solutions and how you also navigate your customer towards a certain use case, because these limitations will be more important for some use case versus the others. So by far, that's not an exhaustive list, but one of the main, or some of the main ones to highlight are knowledge cutoff, hallucinations, limited context, and bias. And I'll quickly go through each of them just to give you a sense of what each of them means. So bias in large language models is, actually inherently human. So because the models were trained on the content that exists out there that was produced by humans, they inherited our misconceptions or our prejudices along with us. So, for example, some languages more than others have certain attributes to professions that are more considered to be more feminine rather than masculine, and the large language model inherits the same bias. So let's say if we're talking about the secretary, the model is more likely to generate her as a female in the response or in the content that it generates, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of things that is being put in place by the model providers, to try to guardrail it and compensate for this bias with some alternative measures. But I think it's important to understand that it's there, and it can affect some of the use cases as well. So when you're making decisions on where the Gen AI is the right tool to go for, that's something to keep in mind. Another point is knowledge cutoffs. So all of the large language models, when they go through the training process, they get trained on a lot of data, and there's a certain cutoff of the cutoff point at which this training data is gathered. So their knowledge will stop at a certain point. Their worldview, so to say, ends at their particular point in time. Right now, you'll see a lot of tools that are tailored towards consumers trying to compensate for this feature with the real-time web search, in augmenting their knowledge, but the model itself does not know the world after the date that it's been cut off for the training. Apologies for this. That's a lot of talking for me for today. One of the most challenging limitations of the large language models, specifically for the business context, are hallucinations. And basically, that's just the ability of the model to make up stuff that doesn't exist, right? Apologies for this. Let me just grab a quick sip of water. Let's hope I can continue talking. So apologize for this. So the idea is that every now and then the models will make up stuff for no apparent reason that doesn't exist in the real world, and it has some real world implications when you're trying to use it. Sorry. I'll give you a few real examples from our experience. So I put here an article from the news, but just to bring it a little bit more down to earth, we have an assistant that powers one of the government websites that's supposed to ask or give the information about different, travel advisory and ways to contact different embassies across the world. So the knowledge base of this assistant contains the contact information of the embassies across the entire world, right? So every now and then, the bot will pick up the pattern of the email address that's present in the knowledge base, but make up a completely new email address that doesn't exist. This is not legit contact information that it should be providing. It's not present anywhere in the knowledge base, but large language model hallucinates and provides the email that looks very much alike. It followed the pattern, but just picked up a random part of it and recreated the thing. So again, there's lots of tools out there available to try to mitigate this, but this affects your use cases selection for the actual business. Okay, so switching to this, I hope sets a little bit of understanding of the context of technology at play Again, the goal was not to go super deep into the nitty-gritty of the industry, but just to give you a sense of what's out there and what part is my experience coming towards. Now, switching a little bit to product market fit validation, just to give you an idea of what product market fit is. I'm not intending to give a huge talk on the product marketing here. It's more about realigning on the terminology that we're using. So product market fit is your ideal state where you got to the point with your product that addresses the specific need. It has strong customer demand because it actually solves a real pain point out there. You have the engaged and satisfied client base. So it's basically the perfect state when you finally reached the place in the market that your product resonates with the users. And there's multiple ways to measure product market fit. There's usually a combination of different ones, be it customer feedback, which is a bit more subjective. Then there's specific metrics and market demand. Just to be absolutely clear, there is nothing groundbreaking or fundamentally different when you approach it when it comes to AI products versus traditional software. But there are a few things in the market, in the way how this business operates, that affect some of the decisions you're making in this domain. And I'm going to go through what we've observed as key drivers behind the industry at the moment, and how does it affect your approach to the customers or your approach to the industry. So I'm going to try to go through four key trends, and then we'll map what does it mean for your business if you're building a business in AI in each of these areas. So first of all, again, it's such a hyped up industry. Everyone wants to be something in AI. It leads to increased investment across the entire value chain. It's not specific to just products. We're seeing that there is a huge investment into the infrastructure. There are deals announcing left, right, and center, because it's also the matter of, longer term security of different countries even. But we're seeing it across the infrastructure, the large language models, if we look at it a bit more as the engine behind a lot of industry movement. Then investment also on a bit more tactical enterprise solutions, and all the way to the training and adoption programs to make sure that your workforce is prepared for this wave of innovation and so on. Obviously, for business, it's great news, more money out there for us. But what it comes with right now is also a little bit of a lack of structure and focus. And I'll cover it in a bit, at least in my observation, what helps approaching and dealing with this in a sustainable way. Another part that it's coming up also in the research, but I've observed personally in the experience with the customers, is that the way AI brings the most, or Gen AI tools bring the most value, is when they are integrated across existing business workflows. So just to give you a very radical example, the AI tools need to come with the business, as opposed to, bigger beasts out there who can come and force the whole way of people doing business into their way. If we take an example of SAP, for example, right? Huge, bulky, is it the most convenient tool to use out there? I personally don't think so, but they changed the way the ERP business works, and they sort of put the half of the world through the pain of using that tool, because it had the muscle and the power that required for the enterprise resource management. And they disregarded how people were necessarily doing business in a way. Gen AI tools do not have that luxury, right? They need to go with the customer to be able to add value. They need to be close to the existing workflow. Another trend that is observed out there is how much of the current decision making at different levels of the organizations and even government is actually powered by Gen AI tools at the back of it, right? So we're talking about everything from report preparation to briefs, and through our exposure, we can even say to government officials, preparation for important meetings and so on. So because of its strengths with the content and the strengths with synthesizing data, it was a very natural development for the industry. But it's important to understand also the limitations of this technology for this use case. And one of the other ones is automation and process optimization. So obviously, you know, one of the most natural ways that people went towards this journey was towards automating, you know, simple repetitive tasks to optimize the load and to free up the time for the people at place to focus on the value-add activities. It also has its own, you know, limitations for or implications, better said, for the how do you approach the customer and how do you manage this. So I'll try now to map towards each of these trends what it actually means for, you know, AI startup, or how does it translate into, you know, behaviors on the ground. So increased investment, on one side, yes, you have a lots of you know, money being thrown around. To be honest, very frequently you'll see at random things. But the biggest risk here is the lack of sustainability of these revenue streams, right? So yes, you can secure a few proof of concepts here and there, and people are willing to experiment and, you know, throw some money around in the domain, or it's something that looks flashy and gives them this, you know, one fantastic meeting with the leadership. But fundamentally, I'm a strong belief that the way to make you know, a sustainable business in this domain is connecting this investment to the real impact. And with this, you'll see also me highlighting this point over and over again. I've seen it a lot in their organizations, you know, because of the hype that the domain gets, you know, the investment gets misplaced towards the use cases that are very loosely connected to the actual dollar amounts or any other factors that matter to the organization. So the impact is not quantifiable, or it's just misguided. You know, we have seen in the industry the examples when organizations invest millions of dollars in the use cases that save them at the end of the day about $100,000. So what's the point, right? But because everyone jumps a little bit ahead of them in this domain, it leads to these misguided decisions. This type of model will never work in the longer term. So if your goal is to build a sustainable business, always go from the impact. Now, if we're moving into the second train, which was integration across business workflow, that ties closer towards the early PMF validation. Being closer to the customer and understanding their current workflows matters. So otherwise, you'll end up building something that's out of sync with the way they're doing things, and then will end up, you know, being a fantastic, again, you know, successful implementation of AI that no one will ever use. So, and in that sense, it's double-sided sort of conversation here, because on one side, it's important to be close to the customer. You'll have your champion from the customer side, let's say digital department or IT department, that will have their own understanding of the workflows of the organization. What's important here is to get to the actual business users and see how this tool relieves or doesn't in many ways their day-to-day to get to, again, it's all ties back to the value realization of the implementation. Then when we're talking about AI-powered decision-making, again, there's a few considerations here. First of all, the closer you are to the customer, the more you can focus your effort on decisions that actually matter, right? So decision-making is a very broad term. Now, if you have to prioritize between a report that gets pulled together, you know, let's say once a year, yes, it's for executive leadership, very senior people review it, but in the longer term, you're not really creating much value by focusing the effort of the organization on empowering that specific decision. Versus you have a lot of decision-making points throughout the life cycle of the organization that require a lot of effort on different teams' side, and empowering those might in the end result in higher value for the organization than, you know, this one senior person. And people tend to focus, on the more important titles for obvious reasons. But it's part, I think, of the journey. Again, focusing on sustainable success, helping navigate your customer to realize this value, even if they don't necessarily, fully see it that way straight away. an important item here as well is continuous, learning of the system. That's a very specific point to AI as well. The closer you are to the customers, the more of the actual data you get, the more refined output and more precise output you'll get eventually in this exercise. Again, that's why it matters to be with the clients early as possible in your journey. And automation and process optimization, I do believe there's a little bit, at this point in time, a little bit more exaggerated expectations of what Gen AI specifically can do for you in this space, because the models in their nature are probabilistic, not deterministic, right? So everything that was already automated through some basic RPA or any other forms of either artificial intelligence, or sometimes, through just basic automation, there's some deterministic flows that have been automated long enough. There is not much to do there. When it comes to a bit more Gen AI powered flows, there is a lot of things that the technology can do, but it's inherent that some of the things, due to the limitations of the model, will not work as expected. The closer, again, you are with the customer, the more you can learn from the data and, put all of the guardrails in place to get to more sustainable success and repeatability of positive outcomes. So basically, the main outcomes here, and like the whole point, I guess I'm trying to reinforce, is that being closer to the customers early has a lot of dimensions that are, some of them are very specific to AI, some of them specific because of the technology, some of them are specific to the industry landscape, and that's why it matters for you to be as close as possible. But overall, I group them into four, key considerations of what will define your ability to succeed in the space. Same point I think I've been raising throughout the talk today was, tying AI use case implementation to measurable impact. Because at the end of the day, it's the value creation that will matter. At some point, all this, investment stream will start getting, a bit more structured, will get a bit more critical thinking, and only the organizations that have the real value tied to their solutions will succeed. Then having also a strategic approach to your customers' AI journey is important for sustainability of their success, right? So there is a lot of excitement in the domain. People jump around between different use cases and so on. It's important to have a roadmap in place with your customer. It doesn't even mean that you are going to be addressing, all of the roadmap yourself. You might be playing in a very niche domain, specific on some parts, and you have no interest playing anywhere else. It's important for you to paint the picture for the customer of the full picture and make sure that all of the layers can support your future success. Main layer, for example, being data. You might not be a data consultant or provider yourself, right? So the organization will bring their data because that's how they generate value for their specific implementation of different AI tools. Fundamentally, for the layer of the application, the quality of the data will define, the quality of the output, because no matter what sophisticated models or ingestion pipelines you've built, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the customer has the data that doesn't really support what they're trying to do, you'll be able to do very limited things on the actual solution layer. But the data in AI also has another aspect to it. The more data you collect from the actual real interactions with your solutions, the more you can refine your product and ensure accuracy and performance. That's this continuous learning loop is something very specific to AI. And I mean, iterations have been, since the Agile Manifesto got published, I think it's been the talk of all the software industry, but I think AI redefined a little bit the understanding of agility because the field changes so fast, and your ability to pivot with it is pretty much life or death for a startup in this context. And the definition of speed is something else altogether these days. So it's more along two lines. First of all, rolling with the punches, being able to make quickly pivot directionally with your customer as you discover more things, but also keep up with what's happening in the industry and be able to change the direction, because some technology, overnight can become obsolete. Or like with recent developments with DeepSeek, you can get enabled out of nowhere with a powerful tool that you can use further. This agility is twofold. On one side, it's the technological agility, right? Your ability to build a product in a scalable way that can adapt to the changes, but it's also a mindset thing, right? It's not getting too stuck on the ways that you operate, or not getting too stuck on the strategic vision that you have for the organization or the product that you're building. And just being mentally ready to change course fast if the situation changes. Now, I'll change finally with what I was hoping to spend the most time on, but I think I'm just also looking at the time here. I'll try to do a little bit of shorter version of it. So I wanted to show you how, for me, all of what I was mentioning tied into the example of one of our products, which is Ask71, of where we started, how we went about it, and where did it lead us. I'm going to oversimplify a few things just to give some of the key takeaways. But the idea is that we created a product called Ask71. The idea behind the product was to improve the way knowledge workers interact with the information available within the organization, right? So to break the information cycles, you have dispersed data across the org, and we were trying to give them the interface that can empower a lot of the tasks and activities through. And later on, through the journey, we also started targeting the a bit more actionable use cases with agentic flow. Our focus from the tech standpoint was on the application layer. So we were model agnostic. We are not in the model domain, and it's an important distinction. We are leveraging, whatever is out there that powers us the most. Our differentiator is on a different layer. And we're always thinking to be flexible with the infrastructure to empower as many customers as possible, but also for us to get access to as many customers as possible to collect that early and valuable feedback. Just for the perspective, the company got launched about a year and a few months ago, and I was employee number 2, and I drive the customer engagement. So technically, I was hired before a lot of engineering force was here, which at that time looked a little bit backwards to me. But I sort of learned to appreciate that this was intentionally or not a very valuable exercise for the company, because by the time we ramped up the significant amount of the engineering team, we were able to have a very targeted activities with the clients, and we had a roadmap that's backed up by the actual, real life cases and real life examples. But fundamentally, we built with some of the early group that was here in the company, we built the basic capabilities, like the very core, the ability to interact with your knowledge base, and we went straight live to customer pilots with the first set of 5. Then we continued to grow quite fast from there. And we noticed the more we talked to the customer, the more we realized there are a few emerging things that are more or less common across either all of them or most of them. So first of all, that the use cases that the clients gravitate towards can be bundled into groups, right? So everyone wants, they don't necessarily know it when they come to you, right? So they want something in AI, they want something in a maybe a specific domain, but they do not necessarily have a very strict vision of where do they want to be, but they naturally gravitate towards certain use cases. And that helped us to preset some of the packaged offerings later on for our customers based on those use cases, because we were able to figure out our prompt engineering that serves perfectly a specific use case, and we package that use case as the offering on top of our platform. So that was a very important learning. But from the the outside in view, from the trying to understand the industry from the outside, some of them we could deduce, and we were leaning towards already, but we did not have the real world validation of the performance. And like, it goes all the way to the, you get tactical settings on how do you need to configure an assistant for this or that use case. Then another quick discovery was also that maximization of the value of these type of products comes with the integrating with some of the core systems, hence my SAP example, because there's some things that pain the people out there in the enterprise world more than others. And there's really, the world of the systems and the different software providers out there is infinite, but there are a few that will give you 70 to 80% of the coverage of the bigger players out there. So that sort of leaned us towards the direction of developing connectors to some of the core systems out there that we see enabling those packaged bundled use cases. So we basically quickly have a solution that can hook into some of the core systems unless the client has something super highly customized or something very unique niche, that needs custom touch. The idea was to, and is still, we're enabling, we're building the portfolio of those connectors, but also, as a startup, you understand that you deal with the scarce resources. So, the prioritization is fierce, so to say. Hence, the repeatable outcomes were always, a way to go. And another learning that I don't think we would have ever realized without going out there to the customers was just how not ready the client's data is actually for the AI at scale in most cases, right? So there are multiple dimensions to this. There's some that are just pure, quality. The amount of repetitive and conflicting information that the organizations have in their systems is insane, right? So it's you can have an educated assumption, but when you go out and see it, it's beyond what you even anticipated as a conservative estimate. Then the data is also dispersed so much across multiple isolated systems that sometimes talk to each other, sometimes don't talk to each other. There's a bunch of things out there. So we sort of, this learning led us to twofold change in our approach. First is the heavier investment on the quality of the ingestion pipeline. So to compensate a little bit for the data quality that the customers came to us with, we focused a little more on making sure that we have a tool that's capable to process maybe not the most optimally structured document or a bit more complicated document. That's one side of things. And the other one is growing the ecosystem of data partners that can help actually, so we can bring in the solution to the customer's problem, again, tying it to the overarching value. We care not about just tool deployment and moving on to the next customer, but more about making sure, that the tool is getting used and the customer is extracting value out of it. And if we see that the data is the most problematic piece of it, we can bring the right data partners also to help the customer bring that part up to the standard so they can actually start realizing the value from the tool. So in general, we continued on this cycle we're still on this cycle, right? It's a never-ending. Product market fit validation in general is not it doesn't have a full stop as an exercise, but for AI specifically, it has a bit more cycles to it. They're a bit shorter, well, if you can, from the engineering standpoint, but they should be shorter with iterative delivery of the value to the customer. So that was just some of the interesting observations from the experience that we've had here, mainly in the UAE, but we have a few international engagements as well. I'd say there's no huge difference that is based on the regional presence of the customer. The learnings and the observations are quite universal. So I'll pause here. I tried to rush through it with my broken voice, so thank you for bearing with me as I was trying to manage it. Abdulaziz, I guess I'll give it to you for a few questions, if we have any.
Thank you, Kate, for such an insightful presentation. Yes, now we will move into the Q&A session. I have gathered some great questions from the chat, so let me go through them. So we do have a question from Wilma Williams. Says, is it possible to know from ChatGPT and DeepSeek which model is better?
There's absolutely. It's a fantastic question, first of all, thank you. And the question that we deal with on a daily basis, mainly because we have a very wide range of use cases that our customers are trying to solve with AI tools. And that's the key to approaching the model evaluation. There is no model that's absolutely superior in everything. GPT comes close to it, but they're still not the best in absolutely everything. So the use case is the king of your model selection. There are some common benchmarks out there. You can see there's a common resources, in the Hugging Face and some other big providers where you can see benchmarks that are individual to specific either use case or the topic of the evaluation. We do our internal assessment as well when we advise the customers and we pick the model that's best. So it's as simple, for example, if we're going for Arabic use case, if the assistant needs to be fluent in Arabic and so on, it's not GPT, it's Claude that's the most powerful as of today in the in Arabic language. There are some that are more powerful in math than the others, some that are better suitable for, agentic flows. So there's plenty of already available benchmarks out there, but I recommend for if you're building, your own solution and your own approach, have your own internal evaluation of the use case per use case.
And also another question from Wilma. What are the ethical and legal considerations when integrating generative AI across the business model?
Oh, this deserves its own conversation.
Yes,
It's like it can be easily another webinar. It's a fantastic question that my honest answer, nobody fully figured out the answer to yet. There are benefits of us being in the UAE and the regulational domain that we are in and what areas are, a bit heavier regulated versus the others. We have a bit less restrictions compared to, let's say, Europe in that domain. So on the legal side, we can get away right now with just, a few disclaimers here and there saying that, this is AI generated. The responsibility is still with the human who is making decision based on the output that they received and so on and so forth. That's not necessarily enough in Europe. So there's a bunch of other things that need to be done to comply with the legal regulation. The ethical part is a field of its own because it has also multiple domains, right? There is inherent bias that we just discussed a little bit in the presentation part. Basically, that the models themselves inherit certain, biases from the data that they learn from. And, it's more applicable for some use cases than others. Then you have also the ways people try to use those models and the ethical consideration it poses. So, for example, if you use Copilot to record a staff meeting and provide, transcription and everything, and then you start interacting with it. Okay, based on the meeting, who do you think should be fired? Things like that, right? Technically, I'm just giving a very, extreme and slightly silly example to give you a flavor of just the domain that it can go to, right? So the way the solutions are dealing with it at the moment is mainly trying to implement guardrails, as many guardrails as possible to this type of solution on what they engage with, what they don't engage with. And in the last, I'd say 3-4 months, especially, there's been a lot of success in the domain in trying to, reduce harmful content generation, but also reduce this, a bit more ambiguous questions handling, such as, for example, who to fire out of the people who were just in the call. But I wouldn't say that we solved it 100%, right? There's another part of the ethics also about replacing humans and so on and so forth. But I think this is the easier part, at least for me, in the sense that AI, as of today, is not in a state to replace, skilled workforce. it's in the position to free up some resources to do the a bit more value-added activities and so on. But we're not talking about massive displacement of the workforce, while the industry itself actually does generate a lot of the engagement, a lot of the employment, and so on and so forth. So that's the one side that, at least from my personal view, I don't necessarily see a huge problem, even though there's a lot of anxiety in the domain about it replacing humans and displacing a lot of the employment. But then the technology side of things, guardrails are good and they are evolving. There's a lot of things that are being done also during the model training to put some safety into it and so on. But I don't think we figured it out 100% yet.
Based on what you said, Ahmed Al-Hashmi is asking, would you say that Llama is easy to integrate into a self-hosted LLM, or there is a better option?
From the open source solutions out there, I think Llama is by far the best. I mean, Mistral is good for some of the tools, but in general, it's not difficult. We use Llama for some of our use cases, especially for the customers that need open source solutions because they are more sensitive on deployment side. It works quite well.
And Muhammad Shahida says, what are the key tools that you suggest to use when building a custom LLM?
Well, being custom LLM is a very heavily intense exercise. I mean, kudos to you for going into this domain. I don't actually. I'm just trying to think if there are any specific tools for students. I think you just go with the engineering resources available out there. Hugging Face in general for everything that's to do with both research and getting access to the models is the best. So you can fine tune the models. You can get a lot of input also into how other researchers. It has a strong community behind it in terms of different activities on individual smaller things. So it's actually a great resource. Then when it comes to actually hosting, there are a lot of providers out there, but generally the getting access to the model and to compute is a bit more of a cost intense exercise. So there's solutions like Together AI that allow you to consume per request, so you can experiment and see which one is better for you before you go and commit for a bit bigger cost of hosting the model. And there's a bunch of also hackathons happening out there on average for those who are trying to build solutions on top of different models. There are different platforms that run a competition and give you prize credits for compute that you can use to then further experiment with the model and so on. For example, there is one on Falcon happening I think next month that you can participate, get access to Falcon models with some free credits to experiment, try to fine tune it for specific case, and so on and so forth.
And another question says that how do you pick the clients from the first engagements?
It's a good question. In general, we have one of our leaders here has a mapping of all the clients, as a roadmap, like have your family first. You go to your family first. Those who will be, understanding, those who will be a bit more patient with you, will, but also at the same time, maybe will give you a bit more unfiltered feedback and so on. I would introduce to this definition of the family also the view of the business of the customer, of how much what they're trying to do in the domain aligns with what you want to do as the company overall. So it's more, you can have the best customer, in the world, the most understanding, very, able to allocate the resources and the time and even maybe pay you for these trials and so on and so forth. But if their use case is boring and doesn't really challenge you technologically in any way, it doesn't push you forward, that's going to end up being slightly a waste of your time. So it's a balance of the relationship side of things and the tech side of addressing the real business, like this customer coming in with the real business need.
So how will you prioritize efficiently when resources are very limited, I would say?
Yeah, so that's an interesting conversation for a startup because, in general, resources are scarce, I guess, overall, but for AI startups specifically, it becomes sometimes a very intense conversation internally on which things come first and so on. I'd say it's trying to figure out the balance between moving your immediate priorities forward. So let's say if you have a bunch of customers, there is some requests, they always come with the requests, right? So being very careful and selective on the things that you're trying to do on the customer side, but doing just enough to actually keep those engagements going, right? And always reserving a bucket of the resources and the especially on the engineering side to the core foundational activities. So never drop everything and run solely in the customer direction. Always have a task force that's focused on moving your foundation forward. Otherwise, longer term is going to come back and bite you.
And the last question that we have, where does the responsible AI fit in early validation journey?
Yeah, so it sort of ties in with the ethical conversation here in general, because responsible AI is another, I think after AI as just a term, responsible AI is the second overhyped term in the domain, and everyone reads into it what they want. In the conversation with the customer, with all the considerations that I mentioned in the ethical part, I think one of the things that's very important is expectation setting and clear communication, right, with the clients in terms of what this tool is and what it isn't. All the way to elaborating on the technology limitations and so on. So everyone comes into these activities with the clear understanding of the boundaries of this domain. And that helps actually then progress on this journey with the customers, even though, because usually when you're early on, advanced guardrails is not something you invested too much effort into. You just be straightforward with the customer about it. Usually they also will not go to their organization wide 7,000 users or whatnot with the first version of the solution, right? So just being careful about navigating these things should do the job for the early validation parts, but longer term, you do need to invest some effort into the guardrails, because for some customers, it will have actual legal implications, right? The activities of the solutions that you're providing. So you cannot ignore it forever, but for the earlier stages, I'd say the expectations management should do the job.
So since I guess there's no more questions, I guess that wraps up today's edition of CyberE71 Thursdays. And a huge thank you to Kate for your time and valuable insights, and also to all of you for joining and engaging in this discussion. Thank you, Kate, one more time.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for all your questions.
Thank you all, and see you next week, inshallah.